Today's Forum at 4 session is entitled Preparing Your Venue and Facility for Reopening After COVID-19 Closures, and is being brought to you in part by Church Facilities Conference and Expo, the National Association of Church Facilities Managers, and Cool Solutions Group. Your moderator today is Ron Procopio, with panelists Brian Honeycutt, Patrick Hart, and Nathan Parr. Before we get started, Ron, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, offer a brief overview of what we'll be covering today, and introduce us to your panel?
Absolutely, Christine. Thank you. My name is Ron Procopio. I am the general manager of the Church Facilities Conference and Expo, which is going to be held in September 29th and 30th in Dallas, Texas. Fingers crossed. Formerly, I was the Expo Director of USITT, so some of you may be familiar with me. It's only been a little bit over a year since I've left. I am very excited to be working here with this association yet again. Today's conversation applies to venues of all types: performance centers, churches, convention centers, arenas, and stadiums. As an industry gearing back up, this will be essential. What does this entail? How do we go about it safely for patrons, congregation, and staff? To discuss this today, we've brought together experts from a variety of arenas and obviously crossover between our spaces. Today we have Brian Honeycutt, who is the president and CEO of Honey Badger Entertainment Consulting. He's co-founder of the Safety Advisory Forum, commissioner of the Safety and Health Commission of USITT, former program manager of entertainment safety and cast preparation and incident response for Disney parks and live entertainment. Also, we have Patrick Hart. Patrick Hart is the executive director of the National Association of Church Facilities Managers. He is the facilities manager of North Shore Christian Church and Academy, and formerly facility supervisor of Overlake Church Christian Church. Finally, last but not least, Nathan Parr. He's the facility specialist at Smart Church Solutions. He's formerly an operations manager at First Baptist Church of Belton, and previously a student member of USITT, so he is familiar with both our groups and our associations. Patrick, I'll start with you. You and I had previously spoken when we were beginning to plan this webinar today, and you'd mentioned that your church had been contemplating if this was the time to start your summer projects. What did those projects entail? Did you decide to do those projects now? And did you need to make any amendments around COVID-19 and the crisis?
We, at the time that we were discussing that, we were just entering the period of our Stay Home, Stay Safe initiative here in Washington State. And we have an academy with 1,000 students, and they were all forced to go learn distance learning. We converted immediately to that. And during that time, we were trying to figure out, okay, so how long is this going to last? Are we going to be back before the end of the school year? And what can we do to disinfect the classrooms and be ready for that? We completed that, and we were still staying at home and staying safe. And then it became obvious that they weren't going to be back this school year. And then it was like, well, let's do some things. We're going to do a little deeper cleaning and move on. But our normal summer maintenance includes deep cleaning of all the classrooms, cleaning all the carpets, fixing things that we can't fix when there's 1,000 students on campus, maintaining our church facilities as well. We have 5 buildings and 165,000 square feet. And usually we pack those things into about 2 months. Between the end of school in mid-June and the return of teachers in the middle of August, we moved ahead, and we're almost done with all of our cleaning and maintenance and deep cleaning. And our goal is to have all that completed by the end of May. And then, not really sure, June, we'll find some other deeper things to do. And then July, I think we may be sending everybody out on vacation. I don't know. I'm hoping at some point I can take a vacation.
Yeah, don't we all at this point? Brian, I know you were part of the creation of the Event Safety Alliance Reopening Guide, which was shared around. I saw it yesterday and read through it today. Can you talk a little bit about this piece?
Sure. Just to give it a little bit, the Event Safety Alliance reopening guide. The Event Safety Alliance group basically is made up of professionals around the event industry, folks that represent large venues, large spaces, festivals, and this group came together to make sure that there was some document out there that came from professionals to give guidance to folks that are having the kinds of questions that we're all here to talk about today. And really, this guide was put together so that there's some consistent thought into what do we need to do, what do we need to think about, especially in a space where you might not even know where to start. So the great thing about the Event Safety Alliance reopening guide is the fact that it becomes that resource and becomes a point to begin having the conversation, to begin looking at what those questions are. And most of the time when we go into this uncharted territory, we don't even know the questions we need to ask. We go down the path of we need to do all of these things, but we're really not sure if we're doing the right things, if we've touched base with all of the components that we need to do, if we're focusing too much attention on one side of the coin versus the other. So this is a great reference and a great place to begin. To begin having the common language and start to get some of those connections, and also get some of the connections within the industry to those folks who can ultimately help to answer the question. And the great thing about this is, these are the experts, these are the people that live this, will be living this for quite some time. And so as this is the first iteration of this guide, I expect that you will see many revisions as we go forward and as we deal with new and exciting challenges and the things we learn as we begin to reopen some of these venues and spaces.
So one of the questions that I have in particular is, a lot of what we've been talking about or has been talked about is doing some of those summer plans, doing some of the upgrades and things that have been on the back burner for a long time. How do we rectify making those updates and implementing change during a time of recession and lack of revenue? How do we balance as venues that dilemma? Anyone have a thought on that one in particular? Maybe there's not an answer.
Well, I'll take a shot at it. For me, our budget cycle falls right in the middle of the summer. So our new fiscal year begins in July 1st. We have been asked to reduce budgets as a giving-based organization. Our revenues are certainly down from the church side. Fortunately, on the school side, people are still paying tuition. Kids are still receiving an education. And we understand the need of maintaining and keeping the facilities clean. And the need is even greater now with the whole COVID-19 situation, disinfecting. And so I'm able to spend money. I just have to be very cautious in how we do it. But we've also had to change our protocols for there's a lot of things we can't do because we still have to maintain physical distance between my team members. We don't want them close together. We have an office space where it's like a little gathering space, and it's hard for them to be in there and have a break, but maintain physical distance. So we've had to change some of that. And, if we're using a scissor lift, we're going to be at opposite ends of that. It's going to be stretched out to 8 feet. Just don't get close. Feel like I should get a shirt that says stay back 6 feet. It just feels weird that you're pushing people away all the time.
Yeah, it definitely seems unnatural in a lot of ways. We had a couple of questions come in before the webinar, which was fantastic. Thank you to everyone who did that. One of them, or a couple of them specifically, talked about disinfecting machines for their spaces. Interestingly enough, from a variety of sizes, meaning different size spaces. One question here says, I have been researching disinfecting misting machines as our church building is very large. There are several sizes: handheld, backpack, floor models. Some have longer hoses, some have long wands. How do I find the best brand to purchase? I will piggyback on that same question with another one that came in that says, if our plan is to have a single service Sunday, is it necessary to have a sanctuary fogged and sprayed with a machine to disinfect, or can it be done with an EPA-approved coronavirus disinfectant by our custodial team? Nathan, you had mentioned previously that there was an EPA document of recommended materials to use. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So the EPA actually has a listing now. If it's an EPA registered disinfectant, it's got a number on the chemical. And they have I want to say it's list N. That is all of the registered disinfectants that have shown to be effective against coronavirus. So not every disinfectant is on that list, but more are getting added. It is updated. So that's if you're looking at a disinfectant or what you're using, if you look at that EPA number and know the first 6 digits, you can type it into that list. And I think we shared a list to where you could get it. And you can find out if that's shown to be effective. And so from that second question, if you only have one service, can your team do it? If your team is properly trained, following all proper PPE and everything else and using the appropriate equipment, then absolutely. They can, if it's one service, they are qualified, should be qualified to disinfect their surfaces. Keywords being they're properly trained with the proper equipment. And I know Patrick it would agree, and the NACFM is big on this. It's about training your teams. It doesn't matter how good the stuff is. If your individuals aren't trained properly on how to use it, how to apply it, how to safely handle it, there's a false sense of security that can be generated. So absolutely, they're qualified if you're training them. And looking at the machines and the equipment, again, as you mentioned the previous question, revenues are down. If you've got the money to invest in some of this good equipment or different equipment or emerging technologies, great. But there's still a great deal of merit in relying on what we know works and what can be done and trained and teams can be taught to do and do safely. So I think there's got to be a balance there. Again, revenues are down, so I'd be cautious of spending a whole bunch of money on this when we look at might need just to buy disinfectant rather than a piece of equipment.
Is that the alternative to some of these misting machines? Is Tiffany here writes in our question and answer section, any good methods out there for sanitizing upholstered theater seats that aren't super expensive? Is that just as simple as getting your normal disinfectants from the store?
Well, let me hit on that a second, because I can piggyback something that Nathan was talking about. Equipment's important for a variety of reasons, but just as much as the product that you're using. The EPA list is fantastic because it gives name brands. And we had talked about this yesterday, Nathan and I, that I use a product, or I'm getting ready to use a product that isn't on the EPA list because it's a piece of equipment that manufactures the chemical for me. So I'm not beholden to a supply chain. And that equipment is registered by the FDA for the same purpose. If you look up, it actually makes a thing called hypochlorous acid. That's on the EPA list, but under brand names, but it just doesn't have long shelf life, so people don't manufacture it in a broad thing. But the point of that is that it's non-toxic to humans. So the training becomes very easy because you don't have a lot of danger. The PPE could be as simple as gloves. There's just versus mixing your own bleach and potentially mixing it in the wrong mix, or all of the other things that could go wrong with these things. Making it ourselves in the quantities we need, having it ready, and not being beholden to the supply chain. Because if the COVID-19 doesn't go away, we're going to have to ramp up and continue high levels and high just doing the disinfecting over and over and over again at levels that we've never seen before. Mm-hmm. So for us, we're trying to make it happen with volunteers. So when we have Sunday morning, I don't have a big enough crew to handle constantly sanitizing or running into the bathroom. So we can put spray bottles in the hands of volunteers. There's a link that I believe that Ron was putting up on the CFX website to a YouTube video. It's kind of lengthy, but it's from Fellowship Church in the Dallas, Texas area, where they reopened at the beginning of May, and they are recapping how that went. And it's just a discussion with their staff. And they talk about, they had these backpack sprayers. They pump them up, they put in their disinfectant, and they set the spray to just the way they wanted it, taped it down so nobody could mess with it. They trained their volunteers to go in there, and in 3 minutes, they could spray down their entire auditorium. So it can happen.
Yeah, that's a good point. Patrick. On our website, which is churchfacilitiesexpo.com, and we will have shared the links with USITT, so I'm sure that that'll be out and about. Any of these documents that you're seeing, like the EPA document, the Event Safety Alliance document, the links for those where you can find them on our website right now. Another question that came in earlier today, there's been a lot of concerns about HVAC systems, and I even do see some of those coming in our QA area. There was a story about people at a restaurant that the virus had gotten up into the air conditioning system and spread out and infected others at the spaces. This person here asks, I contacted my HVAC company to ask about commercial air cleaning systems for the AC in our sanctuary. Given the extreme height of my ceilings, 26 feet or more, and the length of air it has to travel through the ductwork from a large blower in the attic, will a system cleaning even help? Or should I just keep the AC off, not to blow it around, germs around during services? Any thoughts to that? Yeah, Brian.
So just one of the first things that comes to mind is anytime we've got these buildings sitting, especially if we haven't been using them in their normal capacity, you're going to have air that's not moving through the system, that's not moving through what it would normally be doing, filters that would maybe need to be replaced off schedule and off cycle because we haven't been running them the way that you would anticipate those running. I think we also had a question about UV light fixtures for disinfecting. There are many air handling systems now, especially for large spaces, that have that or a UV light option to keep the parts of the machinery running the way it should. The biggest advice that I would give is, as we look at this, and to piggyback on something Patrick said a bit ago, the best opportunity we have is from a volunteer standpoint, bringing those folks in, starting the system and letting the system run with no one in the building, letting the air handlers run the way that we would want them to operate. The last thing we want to do is have a system that needs to have air handlers running with nothing running, because then we're not filtering anything out that somebody might be bringing in with them. We're not handling heat issues we may have. So we may be causing other issues and making other things exponentially worse while trying to take the right pathway. But again, with those systems, getting them running, making sure that we're looking at cleaning those filters, cleaning those systems, and getting some folks in to look at that system and understanding how long the virus can live in a space if it's unused, and knowing how long we've been using that space. And as Patrick did mention, those volunteers, we want to be open and communicate the steps that we are taking in these venues. And you let those volunteers, train them, let them know what they're doing, and let them know it's okay to talk about it. One of the things that we spend a lot of time talking about as part of health, wellness, and safety is feeling that you are safe. And the best way to feel that you're safe is to understand when you walk into a venue, what that venue has done to make it safe for you. It's not just taking my temperature when I walk in. It's not just saying, yeah, we cleaned it, we're good to go. We're asking people to use social distancing and wear masks. It's no, here are the steps that we have taken before anyone walked into this space, that before we even got to the mask conversation, before we ever got to the social distance conversation, here's how we disinfected the space to the best of our ability, ensure that the virus not exist in the space before we began introducing people back in space who may be asymptomatic, who may be in that situation that we're trying to avoid through the other efforts.
Yeah, that was a big section I noticed in the Event Safety Alliance, and part of, I think, what we'll cover a little bit more coming up. One of the things going on your social distancing comment there, this week we'll see the first U.S. concert since the closures started. The promoter is promising social distancing guidelines will be enforced. As we begin to set up those parameters in our own spaces, what recommendations can we make to encourage attendance safely and begin to generate revenue again? I mean, I know that it's sort of like a softball, I think, because a lot of it is covered in the Event Safety Alliance with seating placement and scheduled arrivals. Are there any anything that is a benchmark that things should be, or is it just go to the Event Safety Alliance document?
So I'll say that document is a great place to start. However, the best thing we can do and the best thing that promoters can do is communicate before the event. The key to scheduled arrivals and the key to doing some of those logistical steps, operations, is they don't work unless our patrons know what they are supposed to do from their standpoint. So we have to begin to over communicate and look at our resources and our ability to communicate to our patrons on what steps they need to take so that we can successfully fulfill our obligations and our operations. Operations folks are looking into how do I create the safe load-in process for a venue? How do I social distance? How do I check people at the door to make sure that you're okay to come into the venue? And we're already seeing just in public settings and unfortunately in news, there's a lot of folks out there that may not feel that this is a serious issue, and we need to make sure that we're identifying and dealing with those attitudes well in advance of them showing up at our doors. That they understand that part of the agreement of coming into this space is you are going to comply by these regulations. These are the steps we are taking. Purchasing this ticket or coming to this space means that you are agreeing to take these steps. And if you're not agreeing to take these steps, then then we're sorry. Now is probably not the time for you to return. And being very upfront about that communication and very upfront about how seriously we are taking these steps.
That was one of my questions that I had written down is, how do we distribute those responsibilities for maintaining social distancing and cleanliness, and how do we rectify that balance between what is the general public's responsibility versus us as a venue or a promoter or a producer of events?
Well, one of the things I've been thinking about as we've been gearing up for this was that I get questions all the time from churches across the country. Their churches and their venues are different than mine. And yet there are some things that we should all be doing that are the same, but you can't just do cookie cut my process and put it into your venue. This might be a good time to throw that PowerPoint up, because
yes,
what I think is that if we focus on three things, this works across facilities, that you have to develop your plan with your team. And that's going to include, in terms of a church, I need to get pastoral staff involved. I need to get facility staff involved. I need to get the people that lead volunteers involved. But we have to focus on people, place, and process. And Brian already talked about the great wide area of people that you're going to get. People that don't believe it's a danger, people that are afraid of coming back. How do you deal with all that without taking a stance and making someone feel inferior or that you're being judgmental? So you've got not only the people that are coming to visit you, your members or your patrons or your staff, you've got vendors, you've got, let's say, performers. Someone asked me if we could use a fogging machine like you'd use on stage to disinfect your auditorium. Well, I don't know. If it's heating it up, maybe not, depending on your product. But the question that came out of that was, well, could the fog carry the virus? Could we put performers in danger because they happen to be up there in a fog and they're breathing in this stuff that's normally innocuous, but are we putting them in danger? So those are the things that your venue would have to be looking at on your reopening team. We got to look at the impact of the health and well-being of all these people, and then have your plan together, document it so that you can train. If you don't document it and you don't have a written plan, I've gotten, I can't count how many emails from different businesses, vendors, even on Facebook, you'll see them pop up, and it'll be all about, here's what we're doing to make our business safe for you to return. I live at the home of Costco. Costco requires you to wear a mask to go in there. It's a membership-driven organization. People are freaking out. They're dropping their memberships. So it's just a requirement for Costco. That's what they've decided. Well, we're going to have to decide what is right for our organization. The King County, Washington, where I live, is instituting starting next Monday. If you're out in public and you're within 6 feet of people, you better have a mask on. Not that they're going to arrest you, but that's the way they're choosing to go. Where my church is located, Snohomish County, that's not been brought up yet. So as a congregation, we're going to have to decide, is everybody going to mask up? And if so, what image are we sending from the people that are up on our stage? Are they 6 feet apart? Are they wearing masks? Are we sending the same signal? Lots to think through on the people side. What are the community expectations when people come back in? What's going to make them feel safe? What's going to make your staff feel safe? I've got staff that have gone home because they have underlying health conditions. I don't know when they'll return. What will make them comfortable to return? What about your other organizational guidelines that in a church, we do communion. How do you do that when people reach in to get something out of a thing and, oh, I touched that. Do you serve coffee? Is somebody going to pick up that cup? You talk about the place. Every building is different. What are the physical challenges or the opportunities? Are you going to provide distance parking to give people a chance to get out of their car without running into somebody? Well, do you need more parking attendants? Do you need people to direct them? Restroom usage, how are you going to limit that? If you go to Home Depot or Costco, they're not stopping you from going to the bathroom, but they're limiting the people going in, and they're going in and they're sanitizing. Are you going to sanitize after every single person goes into the restroom? Do you have enough restrooms? The food service opportunities in performing venues, how are they going to manage that? You've got individual organizations that may be running those food service operations, and it's not just food handling now. It's how you're going to handle the safety of that, how you can make people feel safe about it. Do you allow it into your venue? How do you disinfect your furnishings? Soft surfaces, I saw a question about that earlier. Can we effectively disinfect soft surfaces? I'm talking about moving plastic chairs into our auditorium so that we can quickly spray them down with an electrostatic sprayer. If you don't have an electrostatic sprayer, you can order one. It might be 6 or 8 weeks. You go to get a backpack. I've seen people talking about getting little electric sprayers from Home Depot, and they're selling for $3,000 and $4,000 on eBay now. So it's a hard time to be trying to buy the equipment, but figure out what you need, and then just make sure that you've got a task force together. Don't go it alone. You can't make all these things up. If you don't have a team that's on board with you, you're just looking for failure the day you open. Have your written guidelines. Utilize the materials we're offering you. Brian's document is fantastic. Have a clear assignment of duties, whether they're employees or whether they're volunteers. Train. Do a run through. Before they tell you, open up your doors. Do a run through, see how it goes, make some adjustments. After you have an opening, go back through, talk it over, readjust. Things are going to change. In Texas, they're able to open, I think, 25% of their room occupancy. When we open up, and it might not be till July, we're looking at maybe 50 people in a room. So we're looking at multiple venues. That's different. How many venues could we have? How close to the bathrooms? Those are all things that have to be considered. But if you go through these things and focus on those 3 things, the people, the place, and the process, and do it with a team, I think you'll be have a higher degree of success in having a good relaunch.
This is, I think, a good transition point. In doing the planning for this webinar, I began to research checklists and facility planning for cleaning. I began to start to make my own, and I found Smart Church Solutions had already done my homework for me, which is what connected us with Nathan. Nathan, can you talk about the checklist that I will bring up right now here for you? It's this one. And how did this process go about with creation, and what can people take away from this?
Sure. So we've produced a couple of these. We've had them out now for a couple of weeks. And this one in particular, for those facilities that shut down, that did have to shut down, couldn't attend, couldn't remain open, there's a lot that you need to consider to reopen that venue, that space. And these checklists, these guidelines, they're simply intended to give you a good starting point to think and look through and consider all of these different items that you may need to do to bring your building up to operational capacity, operational standards. Like Brian was mentioned earlier, these systems are designed to operate. Your facility systems are designed to operate. They're engineered for certain things. So bringing them up, but then in addition to that, just your buildings and grounds. So that's what this one was for, and it was just, we kept getting calls, hey, what should we be doing? So obviously, and like Patrick was doing and several others, while your building's slowed down because people aren't there, that's when you can catch up on all that deferred maintenance, fixing the things that, eventually we need to get that gaffer tape off the floor, that gaff tape off the floor, and actually patch the hole and fix the things. And this is the time to do that. But when you get ready for, in addition to all the safety items, this is just basic kind of facility 101. And again, it's designed to be that springboard that make sure you're checking these things, check them off. And if it takes you in another direction, says, oh, well, what about this? Excellent. That's what it's for. And then that's the couple guides that, again, that we've been putting out and producing, and we'll have some other stuff, just again, intended to be that document to help you think and plan and prepare.
That's awesome. I loved reading through it. It definitely goes to everyone out there. It goes hand in hand with the other documents that are available out there. Again, you can find all the documents at churchfacilitiesexpo.com, and I will share them with USITT to make sure that they have them available for everybody. Talking about communications, Brian had brought this up earlier. One of the biggest issues with this pandemic in particular is the seemingly changing news and recommendations. At times, information seems to contradict previous messages. How do we as leaders ensure clear and open communication with our audience? What are some of the avenues that we should be utilizing, and what are the things that we should be saying?
So I'll jump at that. I think the most important thing is being open and honest. I made a note here that one of the things I wanted to bring up was we were talking about the right things to do, and we have to understand there's morally right and there's legally right, and those are not always the exact same things. So we have to look at if you start from the standpoint of morally right, you're going to at least have a good foundation to stand on when you talk legally right or legally correct. So when we do touch on communication, I think it's fair to openly admit that that facts are being discovered as we move forward with the pandemic. The news is going to change how we make decisions. We are going to make the best decisions with the information we have at this very moment, and we may change those decisions as facts come through that poke holes in the principle that we are working through. If anybody's worked in the safety space for any length of time, you may have heard of the Swiss cheese model. And basically the Swiss cheese model is all about, we have incidents that occur when the Swiss cheese lines up and something can get all the way through the holes. So what we want to do is we want to line up the layers of the Swiss cheese so that the holes don't line up. So we want to put those gates into place. And as we have the communication, it's okay to say, we put this gate in place, we put this in place based upon the latest research we had at the time. We have now discovered that that research did not capture these 5 other things. We are now going to change what we're doing in there. Because that communication point will keep us from looking like we are just, the decision we made 2 months ago, we're now going back on. We want to make sure that we explain, yes, we went back on that decision. Yes, we changed our minds. We changed our minds because we are working with the facts that we have today, not the facts that we had when we made that decision. And that's perfectly fine. So it's okay to jump back and forth with those things and communicate with our patrons and communicate with folks coming in on what we are doing. One of the great things I think any organization can do or any space can do, especially if you have patrons coming in on a regular basis, is make it a part of any opening statements, anything that you're doing. What is your COVID update? What are the updates of the things that have changed? What are the things that are there? Give people the opportunity to hear what you are doing, to hear what you have done, and give them a vehicle to respond. Do you have a SurveyMonkey vehicle that you can say, what do you think of what we've been doing? What are the questions we want to ask about these measures? Do you feel safe? And yes, you're opening up a pretty big can of worms with that, but at least you're getting the information back. You're understanding how your patrons feel, and you can start to make some decisions based upon not just what your gut reaction is, but what the audience or patron experience is as well.
That you hit on something earlier that I had started to work on. It was about letting people know and having confidence, people believing in that they're safe when they come to a space. We at CFX are planning on doing a webinar to showcase the updates that we're planning to do for our event in September, because a big part of it is in the conference world, in the conference and events world, we know what a trade show looked like before the virus has hit. We don't know what the experience is going to be like when you show up at a hotel for the first time or a convention center for the first time after this. And some of those things we don't even know as of yet. Like, we're working with our vendors to figure out those items. One thing that I did notice when I had done some research here, that there is a Global Biorisk Advisory Council. I will suggest this for the group out here. They have a facility accreditation that's been updated specifically around COVID-19. It may not apply to your venue. It may not be something that you want to go through with, because it seemed like there were a lot of hoops to jump through. And it does vary for what they consider facilities. So some of them could have been manufacturing or warehouses, but performance spaces and venues did constitute with convention centers and arenas. So it's something that again, a link that you can find on our website to look into this Global Biorisk Advisory Council and their recommendations on cleaning your venue. Brian, you also mentioned one thing about the mental health. What sort of cultural changes should we expect with our audiences, with our membership and our constituents?
Well, one of the things that we're seeing quite a bit of, especially in the mental health space and mental wellness, is a lot of folks have a level of anxiety that they have never had before. They're dealing with folks who may not have a family unit that they're in social isolation, or they're in isolation with. Families are spending more time together than they ever had. So looking at how the relationships have changed in their lives and the things that they are now having to deal with. So we have a lot of anxiety. We have a lot of depression. And after this, we're going to have quite a few people that come out of this with post-traumatic stress, because of dealing with jobs that have been furloughed, jobs that have been laid off, and the stress of those jobs that might end 6, 8, 9, 10 months down the road as industries shift, as industries change, as the economy shifts and recovers in a direction that none of us can forecast at this point. So it's important to understand that all of those patrons, all of those folks that we have coming into our spaces, they have significantly changed as humans. I've seen the quotes going around that talk about, may we come out of this different than we went in, and I believe we all will. And the big question is, do we have the opportunity to look at the hours that we work, look at the stress that we have in our lives, look at some of these things, and make those significant changes for the betterment of ourselves and those around us, and especially in the venues that we're talking about. People go to houses of worship to deal with these things. People go to concerts and venues to to escape some of these problems, and so we have an outlet and a responsibility to all of those individuals. One of the organizations I work close with is the National Council on Behavioral Health, and they have a program that's called Mental Health First Aid. And that's a great opportunity to any folks working in the spaces, working closely with individuals, can get that training. And that really talks about understanding what the signs are, understanding how to recognize when people may be going through those challenges, maybe going through some things, and give someone the tools to begin a conversation. Because I think the hardest thing to do is we may recognize someone is going through a stressful situation, but then we often say, okay, that's not my issue, I shouldn't get involved. But this training and these types of training that are out there gives people the language and the tactics to understand, I can help. That person might need the lifeline right now. I can be that lifeline. Also, they're the organization Behind the Scenes Foundation. They've been quite quite prevalent in the space, especially in the entertainment industry, with a campaign that's called Be the One. And it is be the one to ask the question, be the one to start the conversation. And you see that space there. And with apps like one called iRelate, it's a chat app basically that you can join for 99 cents a month. And it gives you a peer-to-peer conversation that you can sit down and just say, I'm struggling with depression. I'm struggling with these things. And you can talk to other people and talk to trained counselors and just have that open conversation in that space. And, as people, quote, re-enter the world, they're going to enter a different world than the one that they may have stepped out of when they left work or left their jobs. And so we all have to be sensitive and aware to that and make sure the resources are there.
Yeah, we're at CFX, we're planning on a webinar at the end of the month, which will be bringing in a couple of therapists and pastors. And the idea is to teach pastors how to talk to their congregations as they return to church and help them through the mental health of their patrons. So you can check that out on our website. Selfless, shameless promotion. So that's coming up. I'm going to jump into some of the Q&A that's over here. There's quite a few questions about UVC light fixtures for disinfecting. Anybody in particular have any experience with these? Any recommendations one way or the other? Is this a product that should be used in conjunction with other items? Anybody want to jump in? But Nathan seems to have it.
Yeah, I'm always opinionated when it comes to
bring it on. We love it.
Stuff. I've looked at a lot of these, and part of what I do is research. And I'm one of those weird people that actually likes to read the instruction manuals and read all of the stuff. And a lot of these show promise to do a lot of great things, and there's lots of different systems. So when you say UV light, UVC, all these things, we have to understand we're talking about a lot of different types of systems, different sizes of systems. And a lot of them show promise. A lot of them do great things. You can have systems that focus specifically on your coils and things like that certainly keep stuff from growing, which is great. The better we do with indoor air quality, better overall. You have even larger systems that can actually treat the air, if you will. I know the EPA, in conjunction with the Department of Homeland Security, has looked at those larger systems to see their efficacy against airborne viruses. But the technology is not, in my opinion, is not at the point where it is affordable and reliable and necessary for most people when you consider the rest of your system also needs to be operating as well as can be for that to be as effective as it can be. So is there an application that could work? Absolutely. Is it something I think you should rush out and invest? Honestly, I kind of hold back in reserve and say probably not. When you can do lots of other things to increase the safety and the efficacy of your HVAC. I shared a document that came from ASHRAE that talks about not only in a healthcare environment, but in a large venue environment, the importance of fresh air exchange and air exchange in reducing the concentration. So far from turning off systems, which is not recommended. Not, don't turn off your system. In fact, maybe run it more, especially if people are not there. Block open your fresh air so that you're getting that fresh air exchange and getting that system to basically purge itself. Those are some of the recommendations you see. And then there's some portable things in the document I think we'll make available to everybody. Portable filters that you can buy in critical areas, maybe like back of house where you've got a tighter concentration of people. That may be a place to invest in a portable EPA filtration system to just help start filtering that air even better, and things like that. So I think there's a lot of better investments that can be made for products, and even increasing your filter to a MERV 13 or 14 filtration on your air filter in HVAC. Yep. That will do a lot to reducing the likelihood of spreading of corona throughout. And so those are all things I think that are more practical, easier to do, and more sustainable in the long term, because it's not just what we do now in the next month or two when we return, but what are we doing 6 months from now to keep it from popping up again? Yeah, it brings up a good point. I know we're starting to run tight on time. The question that I had earlier, and I think it relates here to some of the questions that we're seeing on the side, is how do we budget and plan financially for the
the rest of 2020, 2021 and beyond, considering this might become something that we have to deal with for a lot longer? Is there a magic formula? Is there a number that venues should consider? Take your budget, increase by 10%, something along those lines.
Well, one of the things I want to throw out there, the answer to the question depends upon the type of venue that you're looking at. I know a lot of the conversations that have been going on in many of the theme park spaces, many of the large show spaces, and a lot of the private houses is, what's the magic number that I need to be able to make my venue profitable and sustain? And many of those places are having to make the very difficult decision of, if I can't open and if I can't open full, I can't afford to open. I'm just going to wind up putting people back on furlough. I'm just going to wind up endangering all of my actors, all of the folks coming into my venue, and then wind up back in the space where we are now. So it really comes down to the decision, especially for those venues, of what is your operational budget? How good a job have you done in the past of determining what that tipping point is? And, what is a successful show? How many seats do you have to sell for that show to be successful? And, can you get to that margin safely? Can you redesign the space in your theater? Can you redesign the space and redesign seating so you can safely get there? And if you cannot safely get there, the wiser decision now might be, okay, you know what? We're not going to be able to open the doors. We will have to find a way to do some of these things externally. And I think many of the houses of worship have the opportunity. We have an audience that is now used to doing things virtually. So can we continue to keep some of those folks in the virtual space while we begin to attract some of the other folks to come back into the space and run on both fronts for a period of time? So it's really looking at the models differently. Because the world and the economic models that we all knew before don't exist anymore. We now have the ability to do things virtually that we did not before. And how can that save us money in the long run? How can that open ourselves so that we can tell the people, if you're not comfortable coming in or you're not feeling well, then don't come in. How do we look at it in the future when, let's pray that COVID is gone at some point? If grandma doesn't feel well, but she feels like she needs to go to church, guess what, grandma? We can turn it on and you can be there without physically being there. So we have an opportunity to change our look at how we look at public health completely.
Yeah, one of the questions we sort of talked on it a little bit before is the responsibility of the general public to participate in social distancing and doing their part. One of the questions here is specifically around, is there a requirement for us to patrol people that they're doing things, or should we rely on the mass audience to hold up their end of the bargain, in essence? Patrick, what do you think?
I think in our setting, what we want to do is set the table for the right behavior. We're talking about, as we're allowed to let people back in, taking reservations. So if we can only allow 50 people into our auditorium, well, how many different rooms can we do with 50 people? And how many seating groups can we do? And if you're going on Eventbrite and you're registering for this venue, we'll know there's 4 or 5 people in your family, and we'll have 5 chairs set aside for you. And over here we'll have 2, and over here we'll have 1, and they'll all have the appropriate spacing so that we've set that up for you. You go into a grocery store now, the aisles are one way. All the markings are on the floor about where to stand and how many cart spaces to do. And the right thing to do is to follow that. I think people will arise to that occasion. They'll say, okay, so if we're going to put some tape down on the floor, or we're going to have somebody outside the restroom saying, you know what, we're only going to be able to allow in 2 people at a time. One church I heard of said that they count how many sinks are in the restroom. So if there's 4 sinks, they allow 2 people in at a time, because they'll be able to keep their distance as they're washing their hands. Not really worried about it in the stalls, but okay, so somebody's got to maintain that. because you don't know who's in there. So somebody stands outside. That's a throwback to when you had restroom attendants. Pretty soon we'll be handing out paper towels to people. But it's just thinking through those things and how can we make it so people don't have to be confrontational to somebody who's, they're not following through. The mask thing is the one that's big right now. It's like, they're not wearing a mask. Oh my, I don't need to wear a mask while I'm driving in my car by myself. But sometimes I feel guilty for it.
Now, wasn't there it was a woman that just unfortunately passed out while driving because she was wearing a mask while driving in New Jersey, and she crashed her car into a telephone pole. Not to bring it down a notch, but I did. It looks like a lot of the questions that we're getting, I mean, they're pretty specific. Protocol for disinfecting front of house. I mean, I would assume that you're using cleaning products and follow manufacturer's guidelines to make sure you're not, don't pour liquid down the middle of your faders and things along those lines.
One thing that might fit, I saw the back of house, front of house question. One of the things we're doing for our auditorium, and I'm going to put a caveat here. This may not be for everybody. I know a lot of people are looking at disinfectants and spraying and doing in between their events. We wanted to know, what's it going to do? We talked about air handling, short of installing UV things in our air handlers. One church that I know of goes up and they spray the inside of their air handler, the air side, with disinfectant with an electrostatic sprayer. So they're getting it on that side. They're spraying their furnishings. I have purchased an ozone generator that sized to do a gymnasium. Our auditorium is roughly the same size as a gymnasium. I can run it at night for 6 hours and have the HVAC automatically kick on and clean out all that. It's basically, you're creating poison gas. You can't do it when people are on site. You can't have staff in the room. But the ozone will kill everything. It'll do behind stage, it'll do in the auditorium, it'll do wherever without any labor required versus other than just setting it in place, turning it on and walking away. And the person coming back the next morning and packing it away back to the closet. So there are options out there, and we're looking at a variety of things. We're doing both and. We want to be able to give, I liked what Brian was saying, that there's that, what is the comfortability factor for somebody coming in? What's it going to make them feel comfortable to come back? Well, it's to see somebody doing some kind of disinfecting and sanitizing. I would go back to Brian's former life at Disney. I'm a big Disney fan. I call all the facilities workers by name. They all got their name tag on. I thank them for what they're doing, because if I'm paying my $150 to spend the day there, I appreciate what they're doing, that the restrooms are clean, there's not garbage on the streets. Well, we need to do the same thing. We have to set that standard high. But how do we do that? So we want to be seen. We want to be seen cleaning something. We want our volunteers to be seen spraying down something and saying, we're taking this seriously.
There's a follow-up question to what we had just talked about with policing and social distancing within our venues. And it says, how would we deal with those who refuse to follow protocol? And is there such a thing as over-policing the people? Like, how do we, I mean, now we're hearing stories of security people that are getting arms broken and fights happening at Walmarts. How do we keep that relationship both safe and secure?
The biggest comparison I would make is when you go into airports and they have the smoking rooms, the closed off area for those that that need to smoke, want to smoke. If we have people who've decided that they don't want to participate in these, they don't want to wear a mask, they don't want to do these things that we're asking them to do, is there a space that we can gather all of those people together and let them be with each other and be very clear about these are our expectations, these are our rules. If you do not want to, if you do not want to participate in this, to protect your fellow man, to protect other humans, then I can't let you be in this space with all of the other people who are participating in that. This is a social contract. This is something we're doing for each other. But I can't offer you this alternative. So do we have an alternative space that then becomes a space that we have to treat? And I don't want to use I will use the term as a hazmat area, because now we have people who have ignored the requirements, ignored those things, and we need to clean that space. So it's putting an extra burden, it's putting an extra responsibility. And I think it's perfectly fair that if we create that isolated space for those folks to commune with those of like mind, and then we let them know the extra effort that we're going to have to put into that. And I think especially when we are talking about the church spaces, then we let them know that we've set this aside at great cost to ourselves, and we'd love for them to help us with getting back some of those costs to clean that space. So as they leave, be more than happy to take your donation to help us make this available for you. So,
we'll always take money.
There you go, Brian. One of the things that I think is important, and you touched on it earlier, Brian, in terms of training, but as we encounter people, we need to train our people that are out in the lobby, out in the parking lot, with a script that they can handle this. It would be no different than if we had, stranger danger kind of thing, active shooter, the things you're already looking for from church security standpoint or for venue security. You're looking for behaviors. Well, there's a set of behaviors that you're going to be looking for here, people that just don't want to comply with what your venue's asking or what the authorities are asking. And having a script ready that you can easily diffuse that situation and offer them the other solution, whether it's another room. I like that. I'm not sure our governor's going to like that here, but the other option of the online, the online service is still there. We're really going to recommend you go home, or you can sit in your car. The Wi-Fi signal is good and strong out here. Enjoy it here where you can be in your own isolation. But just what you're going to need to do right now until we're able to welcome everyone back in.
Well, guys, this was we're coming up at the end of the hour. This was fantastic. I really appreciate all your help today in talking about this. Obviously, three fantastic experts in the industry. Links to all the documents can be found at churchfacilitiesexpo.com/webinars, or you can just find it on the navigation. Thank you again to all of our panelists. You can learn more about the NACFM at nacfm.com. Information about Smart Church Solutions can be found at smartchurchsolutions.com. I'm sensing a theme here. Information about this webinar and future webinars can be found at usitt.org. Christine, I owe you a huge thank you for all of your help in pulling this together. It was an absolute pleasure working with my former group, and hope to do this again. Lastly, I would say that the first annual Church Facilities Conference and Expo will be held September 29th and 30th in Dallas at the Kay Bailey Hutchinson Convention Center. And thank you to all. I will turn it over to Christine.
Great, because I'm going to hold us up for a minute. I know Nathan has some, if you gentlemen don't mind, you have some very specific knowledge on sanitizing, and that's what our description, led to specifically. And you had marked some questions. Did we get to all the questions? People were asking about water, does the HVAC, do you have any, I can't say isopropyl alcohol very well. There are people asking about cleaning microphones, and folks will also email you after this. We did social distancing in the law, where it's not up to maybe the theater to keep everybody in compliance, but they do have the right to ask people to leave. We do have a mic sanitizing webinar, and I would suggest for sanitizing microphones, Point Source Audio did that particular webinar, and they were talking about the microphone with the element, and theirs is waterproof, and you can use water and isopropyl alcohol. Go to your sound manufacturers, go to shore.com, go to Point Source Audio. I'm from Long Island. I can't say Point Source Audio correctly without an accent. They all have videos on cleaning things. But Nathan, are there a couple other questions? I'm sorry. One more thing. So people ask for protocols for disinfecting front of house. Multiple operators. I've seen other webinars where we don't have to train our staff, our performers, our actors. Everybody has to clean up after themselves. Multiple use, it becomes part of the regimen, everybody's got to do their part in this. Obviously, not every facility can afford to hire an entire cleaning crew every time to do this, so we all have to work on things. And then, Patrick, I'm also going to ask you to kind of, you were talking about cleaning upholstery, and we kind of didn't hit on a final answer. If you guys see some questions in here, could we take some of these before we cut out for the day?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm good. I saw one up there that was asking clarification on my spraying of soft surfaces. I am advocating for replacing our chairs in our auditorium, which are, they're linkable, but they're movable, with plastic chairs that we have in the storage room. If we're only going to have 50 people in there, we could much easier disinfect those in between services. But if you don't have that option, a lot of churches have, well, most venues, theaters have theater seating that folds down and they have soft surfaces. My personal opinion on that is that you're probably not going to get the virus from the seating area, the soft surface. You're probably more likely to get it from the armrests or the back. In churches that have seating like that, they've got Bibles and hymnals. Those are the touch surfaces you want to make sure that you're spraying down, and an electrostatic sprayer will encompass all those areas as you just walk by and spray it over the top. I would be less concerned with the fabric, but it's a multiple phased approach for us. That's why I'm buying an ozone generator. But the feeling for people, if they see that you're doing something, eases their mind that you are doing it in all areas, not just the large group meeting space. What are you doing in the lobby? Christine mentioned, you know, how are you enabling other people to help with this process? I'm sitting in a conference room. Every conference room we have in our facility has a bottle of disinfectant and a pile of microfiber cloths. If a group or an individual meets in this space, they wipe down that room when they're done. And we trained our staff in how to do it, because my staff is not deep enough to run around and do it every time somebody meets in a room. So it's a change in attitude, and it'll be ongoing, because we don't know when this will end. And so let's just all join on with that. Everybody's responsible for cleaning their own desk area, because they're the only ones there generally.
Nathan, do you have one of the questions I did see here was about ozone machines themselves, as far as like recommendations. Do you have any guidance for somebody who's considering that for their space?
Just be aware of the limitations and the dangers. And like Patrick said, he's running it at night when nobody's there, because it's dangerous. It kills things. That's what it's designed to do. Same thing with the UV lights that actually kill the viruses and that are very effective in large areas. These are not safe for people to be around and be in while they're doing their work. So it's not a simple throw in a UV light bulb into a lamp and now you've got a virus killing machine. That's not how that works. I wish it would, but that's not how it works. So if you're going to use ozone and you're going to do those generators, they are effective in certain areas. There's good research, there's good data, but it always boils down to the stuff that's really effective of stopping the spread is harmful. It's dangerous. So used incorrectly, it can cause more harm than not. So that's my advice. If you're going to use it, it takes some research, it takes some learning, it takes a lot of training, and then consistent application of the safe operation and handling of said equipment. You don't just want to tell somebody, hey, go plug that in and knock it out, and then they decide to hang out in the room while it's going just to see what it does. That's not good. So, again, big proponent training.
One thing to piggyback on that, what I did in my research for ozone generators, I looked for something that ozone is heavier than air, so most of them are horizontal. We looked for one that was a vertical application that pretty much creates a tornado. It goes up to 30 feet in the air, so it spreads it all around, and the longer I run it, the more space gets covered. The challenge will be evacuating that out of the room while nobody's there. But you just run the air handlers all night and see what happens. Another less dangerous solution, and I know some churches are doing it, it's more in the restoration business, but a hydroxyl generator. But whatever it takes to kill everything with an ozone generator, it might take 3 times as long with a hydroxyl generator, but it's absolutely safe for an environment. It could be run while people are there. So, you got to pick how you're going to do it. But that's one solution as well.
That's great. One of the questions here, is there any guidance for water systems within buildings? We talked a little bit about the HVAC applications, and Nathan, you had mentioned about that the buildings are meant to be running. So getting these systems back up and running, are there any of them in particular that seem to have more pitfalls or different challenges than others?
Well, if you've had a building not in use for a while, lots of areas not in use, think just from a restroom standpoint, you need to flush everything, make sure everything still works. If you've got floor drains that are supposed to have a wet trap, you need to make sure there's still water in there so you don't get sewer gas coming up as people start using these things. And then as far as, safety of the water, if it's coming from a good, reliable city source, it's more than likely safe. I mean, we need to trust that. But I would not open up my water fountains. I would not have those accessible. I would not have these places where people can easily transmit fluid and germs and virus junk open. I just simply wouldn't. I'd turn off my water fountains. I'd turn off those accessible places. If I'm going to make water available, if I have to, it's going to be bottled that I can just hand to somebody. But getting everything running, if you've got a chiller, if you've got, 4-pipe system, boilers, for those that are still having cold, live in Texas, that doesn't happen very often, but if you've got that stuff, you just need to run. You need to make sure the pumps are running, that they're lubricated correctly, that you don't have the leaks that could have developed through disuse, through sitting there in the pipes. That's the main thing. The safety of the water should be fine if you're getting it from a reliable source. But again, you can limit what you have to deal with, because if I block off and completely cover a water fountain and seal it, my team knows they don't have to touch that. But they also know if it's open, I got to do something about that.
Sure.
So
here's a good question. I think this is probably more of a lawyer question. Are venues facing a liability if someone does get sick from attending an event? I don't know how. I don't honestly know how someone would be able to find out if they got sick from a specific event unless they hadn't gone to anything in 2 weeks.
Here in Washington, where we were kind of the ground zero for the COVID-19 outbreak, they're instituting some things that I think make a lot of people nervous. The one I saw this morning was that as we get to a point where we can reopen restaurant spaces, they're going to be required to take names and phone numbers and email addresses of the patrons who come in to sit down and eat, as well as the time frame that they were there, so that if somehow it was traced back to that restaurant, somebody that was in there that had it, not that was caused by the restaurant, but that another patron was there and you were in proximity, that they can then contact you back. This is this contact tracing. There's all kinds of ideas out there. There's all kinds of conspiracy theories about how they're going to do it, and we're going to get chipped, or we're going to have tattoos, or whatever. But the bottom line is they want to find out who was there so they can call them and let them know. And I don't know how you're going to get someone to put their correct name or their phone number or their address. And I don't know that when we open up, if we're going to be required to do the same thing as a church. Everybody that comes in, are we going to have to take their temperature? We don't know yet. If that becomes, you got to scan everybody that comes in, that's a labor intensive thing. Well, then you got to look at something different, like thermal scanners. I can't picture that a place like Disney or Universal Studios is going to run a scan on everybody's forehead versus a thermal scanner, and they say, oh wait, no, we got to talk to you. You look like your temperature's too high. Be much better, but they're better positioned financially to do that than, say, a church or a theater.
Yeah. And Ron, also along those lines, anytime we're talking about litigation and potential litigation, the thing to remember is a good lawyer can pick a name out of a phone book and find something. So it's just a matter of, our biggest protection in all of this is start from the place of what is the right thing to do, have the resources to identify what the right thing to do is, and document the things that we did. Because if someone does decide to bring a lawsuit, if someone does decide to go down that route, the first thing we're going to have to answer is, what did we do to prevent it from happening? And if we've got all of the things in place that we did to prevent it from happening, and we have taken the reasonable steps and the reasonable things, and we have concentrated on doing the right things for the health and safety of everyone that steps into our venue, whether it be patrons, whether it be staff, whether it be on stage, backstage, if we have done the right things and we can document that we have done the right things, then we have the highest legal protection than we can expect. So it really does come down to doing the right thing is step one. Documenting what helped us make the decision that it was the right thing is step two. Documenting the training is step three. And then keeping the records of the execution of that training is the next step. So that documentation piece really, really is important. And it's not enough to just do it. We have to document what we did.
Probably the last question here. What are your thoughts on air scrubbers with HEPA filters? Those I'm not familiar with.
So that handout that's available from the ASHRAE document, it does talk about those portable HEPA air filters. Mm-hmm. There is a place for them. There are some recommendations that ASHRAE had for it. Typically, you might see it in a healthcare environment. But for this audience and this, when we're talking about, again, back of house, where you've got smaller areas, you've got larger concentrations of people potentially, or green rooms, things like that, it could be a good place to put an extra layer of protection with an appropriate air scrubber that does that will help remove any airborne contaminants that get out. They're not cheap, but they're good. And they're there. And again, the guidelines are in there. I think I highlighted that, I hope, because I know not everybody likes to read all that fun stuff, but they do work, and increasing the filter, the capabilities of your filters and your air handlers, that does just as that's a good idea. And you may want to change them out more often. And that document even talks about, I think that one, or a PowerPoint I got from ASHRAE, about sometimes if you have a known outbreak or a known incident, you might have to institute some additional PPE for your technicians that are changing the filters, donning extra gloves and masks and spraying the filter down to set any particulates so when they pull it out, it doesn't become airborne again, things like that. So there's ways to do that. It's being written by the industry leaders, professionals, and kind of giving you that guidance. But yeah, portable HEPA air filtration units do have a use. They are recommending them specifically in the hospitals and in rooms. So if they're recommending it there, I feel confident that it's effective. It's got some good use. But
so much of what I heard from today was we can make a lot of recommendations. There are a lot of guidelines that are out there, but it is very much a customized experience for everybody in their specific venue. What your venue will allow, what your teams will allow, what your budgets will allow will ultimately dictate what your venue can do in the coming weeks in opening up. Is that fair to say? Just by a nod of heads?
Absolutely. And I would throw out there, not only will it vary, but the biggest thing to remember is every venue can do something. There's no excuse. You can't say I'm so small that I can't do X, Y. You can do something.
This is true. Nathan and I are available to go and wipe down counters, apparently. So we'll do our part. Cool. Well, thank you again, everybody. This was a fantastic chat, and I hope that this was helpful for all the attendees. As I mentioned earlier, all of the documents will be available on our website, churchfacilitiesexpo.com, and we will send out a message with all of that stuff later on. So thanks everybody for attending. And Christine, it's all yours.
Thanks for staying a little extra and nailing a few of those other questions. I really appreciate it. Obviously, we can't cover everything in an hour and a half. Just research some of the places, some of the things we were talking about. Yes, between Ron and I, we'll share links, we'll share paperwork, we'll share recordings. It takes a couple of days to get recordings to registrants. I'll share the social distancing in the law. From what I understood, I'm not a lawyer and I don't want to paraphrase his expertise, but it would be very, very difficult to prove where somebody picked up the virus and where you showed care it would be very hard for them to win a lawsuit. Okay, so we'll make sure we get those things to you. We do have a couple more webinars tomorrow. We are picking up what might be interesting. Shore.com. Shore is doing a get the most out of your wireless microphones next Tuesday. So that's a different theme, but a good one for most of this crowd. But on that note, we hope you enjoyed the session today, and we look forward to seeing you again. Once again, thank you for joining us today at Forum at 4. On behalf of all of us at USITT, we do wish you the best. Take care of yourself and take care of each other. Enjoy the rest of your day, and good night.